Today, we are digging into a pretty bold argument, one that says one of the biggest stories in tech right now is basically a carefully constructed illusion. So, let's peel back the layers.
Right. We all know the story. OpenAI and ChatGPT kick off this insane AI revolution that's changing everything. They're rocketing towards this astronomical valuation, a huge IPO. It's the classic tale of the disruptor who's about to win it all.
But what if that's not the real story? What if, behind all the hype, this incredible rise is actually just setting the stage for a perfect, calculated takedown by the old guard of tech? That's the explosive idea we're exploring today.
To really get this argument, you have to start with the money. The source we're looking at claims that OpenAI, even with its massive valuation, is what you'd call a zombie company. Yeah, it's still moving, but financially, it's already dead.
Okay, first, just look at this number. $17 billion. According to this analysis, that's how much cash the company is burning through every single year. It's almost impossible to wrap your head around that much money just vanishing to keep the lights on and the models running.
And here's where it gets really serious. You take that massive burn rate, you look at how much cash they have, and the math says they have about 18 months left. That's it. 18 months until the money is just gone. The clock is ticking, and it is ticking loud.
This chart just lays the problem bare. I mean, sure, making $13 billion in revenue is incredible for any company, but it doesn't matter when you're losing $17 billion. The core business model, as it stands, is just fundamentally massively unprofitable.
And all this financial pressure is happening alongside what the source describes as a pretty severe leadership crisis. We're talking about things like pricing for a huge product like ChatGPT being based on just a feeling, or a pro version that's actually losing them money. And then there's the really serious stuff, allegations from internal memos about deep distrust in CEO Sam Altman's leadership and honesty, coming from former top execs.
And this quote, supposedly from Sam Altman himself to an investor who is worried about the numbers. It just says it all, doesn't it? It highlights this kind of dismissive attitude that seems totally disconnected from the brutal financial reality we just saw.
So let's put it together. You've got a company hemorrhaging cash, and you've got internal turmoil at the top. According to this analysis, those aren't just bumps in the road. They are critical vulnerabilities that basically put a giant target on OpenAI's back.
And that target brings us to a piece of news that seems completely random. Google paying Apple over $20 billion a year to be the default search on your iPhone. Looks like a simple business deal, right? But what if it's the weapon?
And here it is, the central, explosive claim of the source material. The public story? Just a boring partnership. The real story, it argues, is that this is a strategic kill shot, a perfectly coordinated move by Google and Apple to suffocate OpenAI by locking it out of the most valuable group of users on Earth.
And the timing is just perfect. Just as OpenAI is trying to sell Wall Street on its huge IPO, telling the story about how it's going to be the default AI for everyone, this deal slams the door in their face. It embeds Google's AI across every single Apple device, completely shattering OpenAI's growth narrative right when they need it most. The argument is, there's no way this was a coincidence.
So we've got the what, this perfectly timed deal that guts OpenAI's future plans. But this whole thing gets even more interesting when you start looking at it from Microsoft's point of view.
You'd think Microsoft, as the biggest investor, would be losing here, right? Well, the argument is that this is actually a brilliant long-term play. Why would they want to pay a crazy $157 billion in an IPO when they can just wait for OpenAI to run out of money and then swoop in and acquire all that amazing tech for maybe 15 to 30 billion? That's an 80 to 90% discount. It's the ultimate bargain.
And you can kind of hear this thinking in Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella's own words, when he says we are below them, above them, and around them. It's pretty revealing. He doesn't see a partner. He sees a component, a very important one, sure, but a component running on their infrastructure, a component they ultimately control.
So when you map it all out, it's a win-win-win for the big guys. Google gets to box out a huge competitor. Apple gets a fat paycheck for literally doing nothing. And Microsoft, they get the crown jewels of the AI revolution for pennies on the dollar. Everybody wins, except OpenAI.
So this whole thing isn't really about one company's failure. The argument is that this is a classic playbook for how powerful incumbents protect their turf and basically absorb any new threats.
And to really get why companies like OpenAI are so vulnerable, the source uses this key idea, the nested business model. Just think of OpenAI as a tenant. They're building this incredible mansion, but they're building it on land they don't own. The land is Microsoft's cloud, Microsoft's chips,
Microsoft's data centers. This table just lays out the power dynamic perfectly. You've got the landlord, like Microsoft, who owns the ground, the actual physical stuff. Their whole strategy is just patience, wait it out. Then you have the tenant, OpenAI. They own the layer, the code. Their strategy? Keep telling a big, exciting story about AGI so they can keep fundraising, because 70 to 80% of all their money just goes right back to the landlord as compute rent. The landlord doesn't have to beat them, they just have to wait for the rent check to bounce. So what this analysis really shows is that this super futuristic new AI economy, well, it's built on a very, very old power structure. The people who own the land have all the power.
And that brings us to the final, stark conclusion from the source material. The question isn't if OpenAI will fail, but simply when it'll be absorbed. The strategic squeeze is done. We're just watching the final scene play out now.
And this leaves us with a really powerful question for the entire industry. As we build this incredible new AI world, are we actually creating a new wave of innovation? Or are we just building more valuable properties for the same few landlords who already own all the ground? In the end, does the landlord always win?